Good evening and thanks so much for tuning in. This is ET Now Spotlight and I'm Alex Matthew. In chemistry, a catalyst performs the role of increasing the speed of a chemical reaction. But catalysts exist in other spheres as well. For example, a few years down the line, the launch of the aggressively priced OLA Electric scooters may be seen as the catalyst that spurred the transformation towards electric mobility here in India. But skeptics are pointing out that the demand for electric vehicles is not driven by a desire to save the planet. Rather, it's on account of the high cost of fuel. There are a lot of moving parts here, but let's start with the context.
Electric mobility in India is still a nascent story, but a combination of factors is serving to increase buyer interest, particularly for electric two-wheelers. Just a few days back, OLA Electric stirred things up with the launch of two very aggressively priced two-wheelers. The launch on the 15th of August was just a month and a half after the government improved the benefits provided under its flagship FAME 2 scheme, which is aimed at faster adoption of electric vehicles. At the end of June, the Government of India announced that the FAME 2 scheme would be extended by 2 years till the 31st of March 2024. Another amendment increased the subsidy provided for buying electric two-wheelers by 50% to 15,000 rupees per kilowatt hour. And the maximum cap for the subsidy was also doubled to 40% of the cost of a two-wheeler. The effect was instantaneous. In just a month and a half, the total number of vehicles sold under the scheme had risen by 31% to over 1 lakh. And a large number of this increase was in the form of two-wheelers, which currently account for 80% of that total. The scheme has a total outlay of 10,000 crore rupees, of which only around 315 crore rupees has so far been utilized. But while incentives provided by both central and state governments have reduced the cost of acquisition of electric vehicles, bringing two-wheelers especially on par with their internal combustion counterparts, it isn't a desire to save the environment that is prompting the shift to electric.
The trigger definitely is the fuel prices. They've crossed 100 rupees a liter, and the target customer, the bottom of the pyramid, the first-time user, I don't think there is any way he can afford this kind of operational cost, and that is what is triggering the demand for EVs. And I think what Ola has done is actually catch the imagination of that customer.
Another development that will bolster sales of electric vehicles is the transformation of fleets to electric. Amazon India aims to have 10,000 electric vehicles in its fleet by 2025, while Flipkart has said it will deploy more than 25,000 EVs and be fully electric by 2030. Big Basket, meanwhile, has pledged to meet its 90% EV target within 3 years. This, coupled with demand for private vehicles, is giving industry players confidence that the market for EVs will boom very soon.
So the way that we see this market now shaping out is it's going to explode from here on. This market is going to be a very, very significant market. And I'm talking more about the two-wheelers here and the three-wheelers. This market will be a bare minimum of about 20% of the market if things remain the way that they are in the next 5 years. So that means about 4 million units in the next less than 5 years. Now, should things change in terms of policies become more aggressive, there becomes more mandates for IC engine companies to convert, plus the B2B to convert, etc., this number could actually be much, much higher.
But while the prospects for electric mobility are certainly looking up, there are several challenges that still must be overcome.
More than demand, there will be challenges on the supply side. Don't forget, a lot of these components are still imported. We don't have a supply base. People are running on very thin margins for this. They depend on subsidy. Batteries fundamentally are still expensive. They haven't come down to a rate which we want. We don't produce cells in India as yet. That will take time. So all these factors, which do impact the cost to the manufacturer. And of course, as I said, the subsidies, how long will they be retained for?
With buyer interest peaked, however, the automotive industry is gearing up to offer a larger array of electric vehicles. The supporting infrastructure is also being bolstered. The Ministry of Heavy Industries has so far sanctioned close to 3,400 charging stations across the country. and civic bodies also seem to be moving in the right direction. Just this week, the Municipal Corporation in Mumbai set up its first public EV charging station at Dadar, with 7 chargers that will cost users 15 rupees per unit of charge. All things considered, we may be at the start of a transformational shift in the way India commutes. In Mumbai, for ET Now, this is Alex Matthew.
Now, Ola Electric may have made quite a big splash in the electric vehicle space, but it's far from the first manufacturer of electric vehicles. In fact, particularly three-wheelers, there are a lot of manufacturers out there. But let's focus on the vehicles that are meant for personal mobility. And let's focus on two-wheelers first. Ola and Ather largely manufacture the more powerful electric vehicles. I'm talking about scooters. You have the S1 and the S1 Pro that have a battery capacity of between 2.98 and 3.97 kilowatt hours respectively, a range of 121 and 181 kilometers respectively again, and a top speed that goes up to 115 kilometers per hour, by far the fastest option available. And the price, that is 1.3 lakhs for the higher variant and just under 1 lakh for the lower variant. And this is just with the discount of FAME 2. Remember, quite a few states provide an additional discount over and above this. You have Ather that has been in the space for quite a while, that has two offerings primarily, the 450X and the 450 Plus, both of which have a battery capacity of 2.9 kilowatt hours. You also have a range that is between 70 and 85 kilometers and a top speed of 80. They are more or less around the same lines in terms of price as the Ola. Now, the Hero Electric is in a segment that falls below that. They're much more affordable, but also the capacity is much lower. Capacity ranges between 1.3 and 1.9 kilowatt hours, and the range that they have is between 50 and 60 kilometers. The speed is also much lower, between 40 and 45 kilometers per hour. And finally, I left this towards the end because the Bajaj Auto Chetak option does not fall under the FAME 2 scheme, and therefore it is much more costly. It ranges between 1.42 or 1.43 lakh and 1.45 lakh. It is reasonably well powered. It has a 3 kilowatt hour battery and a range of 95 kilometers, as well as a top speed of 70 kilometers per hour. Now, the four-wheeler space is also quite interesting. Mahindra, as you probably know, was a pioneer in the space with the acquisition of Reva Electric, but it hasn't made a lot of moves after that. The e-Verito that it currently offers is seen largely as a fleet option or fleet vehicle. Tata Motors has made quite a few big moves. The Tata Nexon is quite well received across the board, and it will soon launch the Tata Tigor, which will have a fast charging option. And finally, you also have the Hyundai Kona as well as the MG ZS, which are costlier and higher powered. And you have, right on the top of the band, you have offerings by Mercedes-Benz as well as Audi. That's the picture on the product side. But side by side, a lot has to be done on the infrastructure side. Ola says that it will be making big moves on that front as well.
In terms of charging infrastructure, obviously it's an important aspect for us, and we have announced that with the Ola hypercharging network, we will be building out the infrastructure across India and making sure that consumers have very easy access to charging. This is in addition to the fact that we already provide a home charger along with the scooter that consumers can get, and a scooter already has incredibly long range of 181 kilometers. So between this, we believe that the range question will be well answered.
Now, if you were assuming that the adoption of electric vehicles is only happening in India's larger cities, you would be incredibly wrong. Naveen Munjal, the head of Hero Electric, points out that the penetration in India's smaller towns is really quite impressive. Listen in.
So far, the data that we've got is that a large number of the dealerships, about 50% of them, have been opened in tier 2, tier 3 and tier 4 towns. So it's not necessarily only targeted at the metros and tier 1 towns. Rural is also being targeted from that perspective by setting in sub-dealers, etc. But it's more, there's a very large proliferation already happening in the tier 3 and tier 4 towns already. And that's more for the scooters, the city speed scooters, as we call them. So we're going to have multiple bands. We have a baseline, which is the low speed vehicles, what we call as comfort speed. Then we've got a second definition, which is called the city speed category, about 45 to 55 kilometers an hour speed, and will give you a range of about 80 odd kilometers. And then you've got the high speed where, Ola and everybody, they've come into the picture. Now, the second band, which is where we're targeting the commuter segment, that there the pricing has come down to sub 60,000 rupees across the country. And in states where you've got an additional policy, it's even down to close to 45,000 or even lower than 45,000, depending on which state you're looking at. So highly affordable, very, very durable. In terms of the running cost, is extremely low. In fact, it's even cheaper to run an electric scooter than it is to get onto a public transport if you're in any of these metros. Multiple times cheaper than an IC engine in terms of the TCO, in terms of the running cost. And in terms of durability, like I said, we're giving anything from 3-year warranties on the batteries and then 5 years in the vehicles, whereby these vehicles are actually very, very robust.
And that lends support to the view that the shift to EVs is now happening increasingly because of the cost and the savings that it is offering. But the question that a lot of people are asking is this: how quickly will this play out, this transformation? There are question marks about the infrastructure needed, of course, and also how quickly technology will be developed. Amit Gupta, the co-founder of Yulu, believes that this will be a gradual process that takes place over the next few years. Listen in.
We actually will see there will be early adopters, as we are seeing in the EV space. And with further excitement and the price parity with petrol scooter, I believe there will be more buyers for the EV scooters. And then there will be a tip-off point where we will be able to justify more investment into making things work. And I think infrastructure and post-sales support will play a very, very major role. And they will start to make sense when, as an industry, we are at a critical stage. So I see this whole thing playing up for next 4 to 5 years. And if you remember, and I know you have been using Tesla word, so Tesla did not happen overnight. Even they had a strategy which was 10 years old, and they were like, okay, I need to launch Roadster for this consumer. And then now there's an S3 movement, and I'm sure that there'll be further cheaper car and better car from Tesla. So same thing has to happen in India as well, where the long-termness of the plan has to be at the center stage. It will not happen overnight. And I think, apart from the excitement and whatever we are talking about, we also need to work towards getting the other components into the place so that people can buy these products with confidence and with peace.
All right, so clearly there is reason to be optimistic about the prospects for electric mobility here in India. But is this newfound interest in EVs a factor of the rising cost of fuel, or is a transformational shift starting to take place? And what more needs to be done on the policy front to help this transformation take place? My next guest has those answers. Rishabh Jain, Program Lead at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. Thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. I want to start by asking you about the fact that people often look at electric mobility as a chicken and egg problem. Does the tech come first, or does the infrastructure have to be put in place first? Well, the tech is certainly coming fast and furious. You have disruptors like Ola that have completely changed the game seemingly. Is that the answer?
Thank you, Alex, for inviting me on the show. And that's a very valid question that you've raised. I would want to point out one important thing here, that this particular problem is not unique to the electric vehicle sector, right? Where we talk about the chicken and the egg problem. I'll give you a recent example. Something that is unrelated is on what we see on the OTT platforms, right? The challenge always was that even if the OTT platforms exist over the internet, would the internet speed be available for streaming online, streaming the content online? And this was always a problem. Many companies thought that if I start curating content, creating new content, will the internet service providers follow with increasing the internet speed? So, and slowly we saw that more and more internet company providers came up, they reduced the cost, the speed of the internet also increased. So this is what the electric vehicle sector is also facing. So this is not unique. And both the sectors, as in both the segments, on the electric vehicle manufacturers, the charging infrastructure providers need to move parallelly, because the transition will happen and will happen at a very rapid pace. So whoever moves now will always get a first mover advantage. So this is the first point. Second point I want to point out here, that we did a survey in 2019 and we asked the urban commuters, what is the average distance that you travel on a regular basis? And the numbers that came up were very interesting. The median number that an average person said for someone who uses a four-wheeler said that's 20 kilometers. Similarly, the median number for someone who uses a two-wheeler was around 16 kilometers. Now, these numbers are very interesting because most of the vehicles that are available in India today and even outside, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, they have a range which is in the range of 80 to around 200 kilometers. This is more than enough for an average commuter to shift to electric vehicles. I would also want to point out to another aspect where the government has now plans to set up a large number of charging infrastructure. This is in addition to, of course, a lot of the other public companies or other private companies are doing. They've already allotted around 1,000 crores to set up charging infrastructure under the FAME 2 scheme. And at the same time, it is important to note that there are around 130 models that are approved under FAME 2. There are around 1,200 dealerships across the country that sell electric vehicles. And you'll be surprised to know that there are around 380 electric vehicle manufacturers in the country who are selling these. So I would say it's already happening. The chicken and the egg problem probably I would say existed a couple of years ago. But right now we are in the transition and more companies are selling electric vehicles and more charging providers are setting up infrastructure.
Absolutely. I take your point on that. In fact, quite a few of the lesser known companies are making two-wheelers, particularly in the three-wheeler space is what I have at least found out in the reading that I've done. But I want to ask about the policies. You mentioned that there is a move by the government to increase charging infrastructure. If you look at the policies that are in place as far as the center and the states are concerned, in a combination, there seems to be quite a bit of a benefit being provided to the end consumer. Is this enough? Or do we need to see more on the policy front?
Right. So what you said is very valid. There's a specific subsidy that the central government is providing. In fact, the subsidy has recently been increased under the FAME 2 scheme, which also got extended for the next 2 years, where one gets approximately 15,000 rupees per kilowatt hour of the battery size that the vehicle possesses. However, many states, say like Delhi, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, they top up the central government subsidy with the additional subsidy. Now, this incentivizes the consumer to purchase the electric vehicle because the upfront cost reduces because that's a significant barrier. But at the same time, many of these states are also providing support, capex support to charging point operators or to other segments who would want to set up infrastructure at the same time. Now, another aspect, in addition to the capex support, there's another tax subsidy that the central government is providing, where you get interest, where tax is exempted from the interest that one would pay when taking a loan for an electric vehicle. At the same time, what is interesting to note also is that the central government has requested and mandated all the states to come up with specific EV tariff, EV charging tariff. Yeah, and many states have responded. And now, if you have and if you own an electric vehicle, you can charge the vehicle at your own, get a specific EV meter, and the tariff would range from the 4 rupees per unit of electricity to 7 rupees per unit of electricity. Now, this is super cheap. Even this is lower than what you generally pay as a consumer. So these are the kind of policies that the government is incentivizing and providing for consumers to buy electric vehicles.
I do want to ask about one last thing, Rishabh. As far as the kind of interest that we're currently seeing, is it a factor of the cost? Because clearly a lot of people that are going for EVs now, it's not that they have this love for the environment, it's because it's cheaper on the pocket. Is that going to dwindle if you see petrol prices or other fuel prices overall fall dramatically?
Yes, that's a very important question. And at the CW Center for Energy Finance where I work, we came up with a savings calculator. And we found that the running cost, even when you compare a two-wheeler electric to a ICE or a four-wheeler compared to a general electric vehicle to an internal combustion engine, the running costs are in the range to the factor of 10. So even if the petrol price reduce a bit, I don't think they'll reduce significantly. Even if the petrol prices reduces a bit, the EVs will always have significant, or they will always remain significantly attractive, both commercially compared to ICE vehicles. So even going forward, I don't expect that the interest would reduce. Even if the petrol prices reduce, it will only increase going forward.
Okay. My last point and my last question to you, is there anything specifically on the policy front that we can take from countries abroad? And this would necessarily have to be a short answer.
Right. No, thank you for that question. I would say the biggest takeaway that we can learn from other countries is a clear policy target. That is missing right now. We don't have a clear target for transition for new vehicle sales. Most of the countries, many countries, I would not say most of the countries, many countries, I think the number is around 17 countries have clear targets for new EV sales starting 2025, which is Norway, and then of course 2030, 2040, 2050. I think having that target for India will give a clear signal to the manufacturers, to charging point operators, that this particular sector will boom and they can invest their money. And slowly, once more and more people come in, the buyers will also get interested and they will start buying EVs. So I think the biggest recommendation would be to have a clear target for the EV transition.
Absolutely. And a lot of moving parts here, Rishabh. I think we can spend a lot of time talking about, say, fleet mobility, talking about public transport and everything that has to happen on the charging infrastructure. But obviously, this is something that has to happen in stages. And I look forward to interacting with you in the future as well. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
So the cost factor and the affordability of electric vehicles, particularly two-wheelers, is what is causing the rising demand. But down the road, with an improvement in battery technology and when batteries become more affordable, you could see a much faster transformation take place. Until then, that's a wrap on this edition of ET Now Spotlight. It's been a pleasure bringing it to you. Do stay tuned for a lot more and have a great weekend.